Welcome to this YouTube edition of the Press and Journal's Highland League Weekly results panel. This is taken from our main Monday Highland League Weekly show. The show on the Press and Journal website includes highlights of two of Saturday's matches as well as a memory match with Inverary Locals Paul Coots. This week here though we'll just be discussing the games themselves, the results. We're going to start with what was our main game on Saturday. That was Strathspey Thistle 1, Nairn County 1 result that saw Strathspey climb off the bottom of the Breedon Highland League above Rothes on goal difference and with 2 games in hand on their potential relegation rivals. Callum, how big a result is this in the context of both teams that are struggling against the drop this season? Playing out for both sides?
It's hard to say at the moment because there's a lot of football still to be played and they do still have each other to play as well at Seafield Park on the 22nd of March. But I think for Strathspey, where it was important was, aside from last Wednesday when they got beat 7-0 by Brora, they've been playing reasonably well. Like last Saturday, they played well against Formartine and got done with a late goal and they could have had a point out of that game. And it's like, I think it's that, and we've seen it in previous seasons, it's like if you're playing to a reasonable level and you're not getting results, eventually the confidence sort of drains and you fall away a bit. So I think it was important for them to get something again, and as Ryan Essen touched on, like that was potentially a game they might not have taken something out of before, like this from sort of 35 minutes onwards. They had to, Nairn did more of the probing, and even in the closing stages they had to sort of weather that late storm. And I mean, we'll come on to some of maybe the chances shortly, but I think given how the game went and they could, you know, when Nairn equalised, you sort of thought, oh, what's going to happen here? For Strathspey to take something out of that game was a big positive for them. I mean, we'll come on to Rothes in more detail later, but I do think they are going by their last couple of performances, they're potentially turning the corner as well. So it'll be interesting to see how it goes between now and the end of the season. And we talk about this possible relegation playoff, but the big unknown at the moment is, depending on how the North Caledonian League and how the Midlands League pan out, there might be another year where there is no playoff, but obviously nobody wants to take that, you know, nobody wants to finish bottom and potentially be at risk.
Let's talk about chances. Then Nairn thought Ben Barron had scored a legitimate goal to make it 1-1 earlier than they actually did score.
But I think, if you're being honest, and I was actually speaking to Ben Barron's dad at half time, who came over and yapped to me, and he said, and I would agree with him, that he should have scored both those chances before half time. Slightly unlucky maybe with the first one, in that when it hits the post it could go in, or it could go in off you and Story, but I think both he would say he should have scored. With that second one, it's very hard to tell whether, and you can't see for the angle we've got, whether it's in or out. What I would say is it must be pretty close, because you and Story are in the process of diving to claw it away, so it ends out going behind the line, which would lead me to think it was potentially some of the ball over the line, if not all of it. I mean, the Nairn players are wanting it, but we can't tell, sadly.
It's got to be the full ball, and if we can't be sure in a replay, then I don't know how the referee and the linesman can be sure watching the game.
Dylan Lawrence and Paul Brindle now both injured for Strathspey. As I understand it, Dylan Lawrence got injured at the weekend. That could be a big deal, couldn't it, there, to Strathspey's most threatening players in attack?
Aye, it's potentially a problem for them. Dylan Lawrence came off with his hamstring in the first half, and he's had a similar problem earlier in the season. And Paul Brindle did his calf against Brora in midweek, and it's like both of them, if they're potentially out for the rest of the season or for most of it, it does leave Strathspey light in that the sort of striking department. And although it's, you know, seems to be a very difficult market, I think they would need to look to try and get someone else in. Daniel Whitehorn played on Saturday, and he could sort of do a job up there, or in the number 10. I actually thought he was very good on Saturday. He's physical and strong, holds the ball in well, links it play well, good in the air. But if you're just sort of, you know, if you're just potentially dependent on him, and sometimes with his work, he's not always available and things, it could leave them in a challenging position. But it was, at the same time, it's not an easy task for Ryan Essen in terms of trying to go and get somebody in from elsewhere.
Okay, so that's done with that first game then?
The one last thing I would have said for Nairn is, and I think it came across in the highlights, was I thought Andrew Gregg was their sort of shining light. All Nairn's good play throughout the 90 minutes came through him, and particularly in that second half down the left flank, he gave Ali Nixon a hard time. I think for Nairn to beat Brian McLeod, as he said, disappointing. A, that they weren't more clinical with their chances, but B, their general overall performance. Too many players just looked a wee bit, I mean, they hadn't played for 3 weeks, but they looked a wee bit sluggish and nae quite at the races as you would expect.
Okay, let's move on to game 2 from Saturday then, which was Huntly against Formartine United from Christie Park. 2-0 then to the Black and Gold. Callum, very surprised to learn that Huntly had never won a home game against Formartine United before.
It's not actually as big a surprise as you might think, because if you...
16 games?
Well, the reason I say that is because if you look at the time that Formartine have been in the league since 2009, if you look during that period...
They've been dark days for Huntly.
Generally, a lot of the kind of Huntly supporters would tell you during a lot of that period they have been a team that's been in the bottom half, and they've had some pretty lean times during that spell. And on the flip side, most of the time Formartine have been in the league, other than maybe the first couple of seasons, they've generally been a team that's been in the top 6 most years. So when you think about it like that, with that bit of context, it's maybe not a surprise. And still, you'd think maybe over that time, I mean, the Black and Golds have won at North Lodge Park before now, but you'd have thought at home they might have had a result, but it's one of those things. I mean, a good day. It was a good day all round for them, really, on Saturday. I mean, Angus Grant scoring again. He's now scored in 12 consecutive home games. He's up to 30 for the season, and I'm informed that he's the first Huntly player since Martin Stewart in season 99-2000 to get to 30 goals in a season, so pretty illustrious company there. And they also had Greg McNaughton making his debut, having a centre half that they signed recently from Broughty Athletic. It was their first clean sheet since the 11th of September, and Callum Brodie's first clean sheet for the club. And then they also had Ross Still playing his last game before he goes away to Melbourne, and this is his 8th across 2 spells. This is his 8th season at Huntly, and he's been a good servant, and he was able to finish in style. And I suppose the icing on top of the cake for them as well was they had the 2004-05 title winning Huntly squad. They had a sort of reunion on Saturday, and they were there to see it, and I think got a warm reception from the supporters before and after the game as well. So from a sort of Huntly perspective, I don't think they could have really asked for much more on Saturday.
When you paused after Ross Still's 8th there, I thought you were going to say clean sheet based on what you were talking about before. The 2 goals Angus Grant scored because of his achievement. Let's focus a little bit on them. I thought the first one was a great composed finish. Second one perhaps a bit more fortuitous, but I mean, you get it on target, give yourself a chance.
That's it. I mean, a word for him. He's had an unbelievable season, because let's be honest, when you look at Huntly and you saw Andy Hunter going to Banks of D in the summer, you thought, oh, that's a big loss for the Black and Golds. But full credit to Angus Grant. He's stepped up and been outstanding. Potentially Highland League Player of the Year for me.
You mentioned his first goal, and that's his type of goal that he's scored a lot of that type of goal this season in terms of one touch and then hitting it, because I think that's the big thing if you watch him, is his first touch generally is always good, which, you know, in and around the box, if you don't have much time, gives you if you've got a solid first touch, gives you a lot more opportunities to get shots away and things like that. So I think that's a sort of big reason behind his success, even as good a finisher as he is. I was going to say as well, on the flip side for Formartine, I mean, they were dealt a bit of a tricky hand in that after 12 minutes, they lost 3 players in the 12th minute to injury. Robert Ward, Graham Roger and Grant Maroney So
Did they run into each other?
I don't know what happened, but I know, well, Grant Maroney came off against Banks of Dee on Wednesday, so I think he'd maybe
Been struggling.
hadn't have been 100% and had played, but like, I think it's easy saying after the event, but when things like that start happening, it's maybe one of them where it's just clearly not going to be your day. But I mean, Stuart Anderson, I thought his comments after the game were interesting as well, because he felt they didn't really create enough or sort of ask enough questions at Huntly, and then on the flip side, I think he was a wee bit disappointed with both goals. I mean, they weren't really like goals that Huntly had to work particularly hard for, so that's just I suppose a disappointing one for Formartine. The thing going back to the injuries as well is that they're sort of coming at a bad, I mean, there's no good time to get injuries, but at a bad time in terms of Formartine are sort of still pushing for that top 4, top 6 in the league, so you'd like a strong finish. And also they've got the final of the Morrison Motors Turf Aberdeenshire Shield on the 12th of March, so I think they'll be hoping a few of the boys that have gotten in, and Aaron Norris got injured on Wednesday against Banks of Dee, be hoping a few of the boys that have picked up niggles and things that they're, you know, available for that final, because obviously you'd want your strongest team possible for that game. And the last one in this, which I might get an answer to afterwards, but I would like to know who Billy Anderson was supporting on Saturday, because he was the Huntly title winning manager in 2005, but Stuart's obviously his son, so I wonder if they maybe got a half and half scarf out for a few of them on Saturday.
Okay, let's move on then to some of our title contenders who were all in action at the weekend. Banks of Dee 3, Clattercurry 0 is where we'll start. The Lily Whites were reduced to 10 men after a straight red card was shown to Captain Harry Nicholson. Goals from Lachie McLeod, Jevon Anderson and Max Alexander secured all 3 points. For Dee, sounded like quite a one-sided game, this one. Well, obviously if Clacker down to 10 men, that helps Banks of Dee.
Aye, but it was worth saying the sending off was after an hour, but I don't think it was totally one-sided. Like Clach, I think, did pose threats here and there, but I don't think they ever really hit top gear, and I think that sort of wee period of play round about the hour mark decided it, in that Harry Nicholson got sent off, and it's quite a strange, we should be able to show it on screen, it's quite a strange red card, and it was given for a straight red for like denying a goal scoring opportunity for pulling back Liam Jewell. But if you see it, it wasn't like he pulled Liam Jewell over or whatever, maybe had a nibble, but Liam Jewell was still like running into the box and was sort of left hand side of the box, and referee Joel Kennedy pulled it back when the play and sent off Harry Nicholson before the play had really finished. And I mean, it's maybe the right decision, but it was just, I just thought it was a strange one, because he could have potentially let the play run, but he reached that decision, and then from the free kick, Banks of Dee got a corner and Jevon Anderson scored, and it was 2-0, and that was sort of all she wrote from there. I think for Clach as well, one of those days a wee bit. I mean, the first goal's a sort of wee bit of a mistake for Josh Meekins, that, you know, if you're Conor Gethins, you can't really legislate for, you know, losing a goal like that, and then the red card finishes it off. But I mean, they're still, Clach are still sitting 5th, and they've still got a lot to fight for this season, so I'd think they'd bounce back. And for Banks of Dee, after that defeat against Forres, they've come back 2 wins and 2 clean sheets and 2 tough games against Clach and Formartine. So, you know, they're doing what they have to do. They're still, I mean, in terms of their hopes of winning the league, I think it's unlikely now, but they're still there, 6 points behind Brora, having played a game more, and all they can do is try to keep winning and see what happens.
Yeah. On to Brora then. They won 5-0 at home to Devon Vale. On Saturday, Colin Williamson's goal, the difference at the break, but then a second yellow for Devon Vale's Tobias Davies-Brown. After the interval, saw subsequent Brora goals from Shane Sutherland, Max Ewan, and 2 from Brora sub Alex Cooper. Both of Alex Cooper's goals, on description alone, sounded like decent finishes.
They were very good finishes, and they should be seeing them on screen as well, hopefully. But aye, they were excellent. I think, again, red card has a big bearing on this game, because although Brora were probably, I think the team having more of the play at 1-0 at half time and at the early stages of the second half, Devon Vale you're still in the game at that stage. But Tobias Davis-Brown's second yellow, I think it was maybe natural reaction, but I just think it was a wee bit of maybe naivety in terms of like Tom Kelly was past him and he just sort of pulled him down and gave the referee that decision to make, and he was off. And then straight for that free kick, Shane Sutherland scored to make it 2-0, and you know, it was Brora just took complete control from there, as you would expect them to do. And I think for Brora, really, they're coming good, and they seem to be getting stronger at the right time of the season. Like, that's 4 wins in the bounce now. They've scored 17, conceded 0. Like, you can't really ask for more than that, and they seem to just be riding on a crest of a wave at the minute. The last thing I think is interesting with this game is the teams meet again this Saturday in the semi-final of the R. Davison Bankery Highland League Cup, and from a Vale point of view, you would hope that what happened on Saturday hasn't dented their confidence and belief too much going into that semi-final, because that's it's a big game for both teams, but particularly for Devon Vale to try and get back in a final. It's a massive game, and although they got that result on Saturday, they've beaten Brora at Princess Royal Park earlier in the season, so I think Gary Wood will be trying to tap into that more than what happened at Dudgeon Park. But on the flip side, Brora, I think a lot you'd be looking for same again, and they're a team that's used to getting to cup finals and lifting trophies, so that'll be their expectation. But what doesn't make it slightly interesting as well is that out of their squad for Saturday, Connor Bunce, Matthew Wright, Gary Poulin and Ross Hardy are all cup tied, so Stephen McKay will be forced into a few alterations.
Okay, Rothes to Brechin City 3, as touched upon by Callum earlier. It's an interesting one. Kind of ironic that on the day that Rothes had dropped to the bottom of the Highland League, it was a good performance. They pushed Brechin pretty close, pretty tight win in the end for Brechin. Thomas Brady and Killian Sheridan, early goals exchanged by the sides. Spencer Moreland then had Brechin in front after half an hour. Brad Mackay then made it 3-1 just after the interval. However, the visitors were reduced to 10 men when Ewan Loudon was sent off for what was a deliberate handball in the penalty box in the 72nd minute, or at least adjudged to be one. Andrew Skinner's spot kick, though, was saved by Lenny Wilson, so it's still 3-1 to Brechin, but Sean Morrison pulled another goal back for Rothes late on, 3 minutes left to go. I think Patrick Craig, the Brechin manager, didn't sound particularly pleased with how Brechin performed, certainly, and how he felt they'd been pretty profligate with their chances in the game.
They're wobbling a little bit, they are, because it's been a tough run for Brechin, but I know the manager's looking for more from his team, but they've gone away from home. They've been 1-0 down in the first minute, I think it was.
40 seconds.
Yeah, and they've dug in to win it, and really it's just about getting points on the board at this stage. They're 4 behind Brora. They've still got a game in hand. I know the goal difference is now heavily in Brora's favour, but it's still in Brechin's hands. That's how they'll be looking at it. We win our game in hand. We've still to go to Dudgeon Park. That's the bigger picture here. They just need to dig in, roll the sleeves up, and keep picking up the points.
I feel like we don't get too many of these sort of runs of games on a weekend now where there's like a red card in every single game.
It's one of those
red cards are shaping matches, that's for sure.
I think like what you're saying, it's like the win was a crucial thing for Brechin, because the position they're in now, they can't really afford it. When Brora keep winning, they can't afford to drop more points. For Rothes, I think the performance there on Saturday and last Wednesday against Forest when they lost 3-2 is certainly more encouraging for them in terms of trying to keep themselves off the bottom. I mean, it's easy to say, but like the penalty is it's a really big moment for both teams, because if it goes in 3-2, 20 minutes to play against 10 men, who knows what might have happened. And I mean, they got that goal later on with Sean Morrison, but it was maybe just a wee bit too late. But I think there are sort of signs of Rothes, as I said earlier, turning the corner, and I do think Sean Morrison is somebody who can make a big difference for them in the forward areas between now and the end of the season, because when he sort of went into Forest to start with, he's done well and he was a regular, but this season I think he was potentially injured earlier on in the season, and with the sort of squad Forrest have got now, he hasn't found it as easy to get back in, so he's sort of champing at the bit to play more and make an impression, and I think that's the sort of player that Rothes need, and with that enthusiasm, that desire, and also his quality and his pace in the final third, that's the sort of thing that can galvanise the Speysiders.
I like the fact that we have a potential relegation playoff now in the Highland League, because this game shows you what impact that has on the league. If there's nothing at stake, and the clubs, Strathspey and Rothes, don't know that at the bottom of the league at the minute, they might be finishing bottom has consequences this season, but because they're fighting, here you've got the team that's coming challenging for the league, going up to a team at second bottom and really getting it's a huge scare, you know what I mean? Rothes are having to really fight hard to try and for their own sake, for survival at this point, and it's making games so much better for us as neutral observers to be covering.
Let's move on then to the other games that took place on Saturday. Fraserburgh 5, Lossiemouth 0, where we'll start. Sounded like a game, this one, where Fraserburgh turned the screw after the break. Logan Watt, Aidan Sopel, he scored twice. Fraser Mackey and Brian Hay with the goals in this one.
I think Lossie really were well short of their best, and what was most disappointing for them was that although Steve Porter wasn't particularly impressed with the first half performance, they were 1-0 down at half time, so they were still very much in the game, and they were also playing down the slope at Belsley in the second half, but really I don't think they ever hit the heights in the second half, and the Broch were good as you would expect, and really sort of just took command of things. But again, if you look at from a Lossie perspective, first of all, the third, fourth and fifth goals are all very avoidable. The third and fourth sort of speak for themselves in terms of individual mistakes, and then the fifth one, it's just too easy for Brian Hay at the back post to score for a corner. So I think for Lossie that was a real disappointment. But for Fraserburgh, they just keep ticking along very nicely. I mean, you still go back to it, since they lost to Lossie at Grant Park in September, they've only been beaten twice since then. Once was Rangers at Ibrox, another was Formartine at North Lodge. So
it's 4 league defeats all season, same as what Brora have at the top of the table.
It's just been an excellent run, and I mean I think they've got just about everybody fit as well. So at the moment, Mark Cowie's able to rotate and able to try different things, and a lot of players sort of pushing to try and stake a claim for a regular spot in the side. So it's all, that's all very healthy, that competition. They're in one final. They've got semi-final of the R. Davison Bankery Highland League Cup on Friday, so there's still a lot to play for. And I think the last thing that would be pleasing them, although they don't have maybe somebody sitting on 25-30 goals at the moment as we've seen in years previous, they've got goals coming for a lot of different avenues at the minute. I think Scott Barber's got 16, and Aidan Sopel and Logan Watt are both up to 10, and then you've got like Jamie Beagrie, Kieran Simpson, Fraser Mackey, Connor Wood. They've been all on
Brian Hay.
What I was going to say is I think they're all on 4 or 5, and Brian Hay's potentially on that as well. But they've got again goals coming from a variety of areas, which if nobody, Scott Barber's still doing a very good job for them up front, but if he's maybe not quite getting the same number of goals as he has in years previous, to see other players stepping up to the mark will be a good thing for Mark Cowie.
Wick Academy 3, Forest Mechanics 1. Owen Rendell, Mark McCaddy and Mark McGregor had Wick 3 goals up into the second half. Liam Grant pulled a goal back in 64 minutes for Forest, but this one, reading the post-match comments from both managers, it sounded like Wick deserved their victory.
Aye, they were both in agreement. I think Stephen McDonald had no complaints about the result, really. He felt that, I think there was too many players for Forest just not quite at the levels they have been in recent games, and also he felt that on quite a heavy pitch they didn't sort of handle the conditions or play the conditions well enough, and Wick handled it better. And I think for Gary Manson, I think it was a result he felt had been coming, because in in the last 3 games prior to that, he'd been happy with the performance in every game, although they only had 1 point out of those 3 games. But we saw them on here, they lost 3-0 at home to Brora, but they played well. They got a good draw away at Fraserburgh, and then in midweek they played well enough. Gary felt it in a 2-1 defeat at home to Clark. So I think, really, even though they hadn't won any of that 3, Gary had been really happy with the sort of performance level in the main, and he was just looking for them to continue that on, and they got their just reward on Saturday. And really, I think this season we've seen, even though it hasn't maybe been a vintage season for the Scorries, we've seen certain players stepping up to the mark and maybe becoming more and more influential. And I look at somebody like Kyle Henderson on Saturday. He's involved in creating all 3 of their goals, and he's also scored 11 goals himself this season. So they've got maybe guys like that who came into the Highland League Weekly either last season or this season who are really starting to make their mark, and it's a positive for them going forward.
Yeah. Inverurie Locos won, Keith 0. This was a game, one of many where the quality of the conditions was raised, and I think Locos, according to Dean Donaldson, had to find a way to win in a different fashion from maybe the way Dean would like, but Lloyd Robertson scrambled home the game's only goal 5 minutes before the break from a corner. Craig Ewan, the Keith manager, was also sent off in this game. Let's start with that, Callum. Why was Craig sent off?
Well,
I did read his comments, but I want you to tell
it was
the viewers.
Comments, I think, perhaps disagreeing with the opinion of referee Lewis Brown, and Craig said that he was frustrated because Mark Souter had 5 fouls in the game and hadn't been booked, which I can understand if his disappointment there, because generally now if a player has 5 fouls in a game they will pick up a yellow card, but the referee seemed to take issue with Craig's tone or his language, which I find, knowing Craig quite well, I find slightly surprising, but I think he felt a booking for himself would have sufficed, but clearly Lewis Brown disagreed, which is his right, really, but that maybe sort of put the tin lid on a disappointing day for Keith. I think Craig's other comments after the match, he sort of felt like his side never played particularly well throughout the 90 minutes, and especially in the first half when they had the wind behind them. He didn't feel they used it well enough, and they were sort of too passive in their performance. And I suppose the one maybe slight crumb of comfort is, you haven't played well and they were still in the game right until the end at only 1-0, but then I suppose on the flip side it probably feels like a bit of an opportunity missed, and I think the goal they lost as well, a bit of a sort of scramble at a corner, would disappoint the Maroons as well. But on the flip side, Inverurie, they're a bit like what I said about Brora, they're coming good at the right time. That's 5 wins in a row, they're now 5 points clear in 4th spot, and they're having a very good league campaign, and if they can finish it off and finish in that top 4, given where they've been in recent seasons and before Dean Donaldson come in, I've said it a few times, but if they could finish 4th, that would be an excellent sign of progress for them.
Yeah, the promised land of the Challenge Cup.
Well, doesn't look likely at the moment due to changes.
One more game to discuss. Turriff United won, Buckie Thistle won. Rhys McEwen looked like he could have given Turriff a good win, only for Innes Mackay to level with what I'm told is an overhead kick stunner.
Well, both,
late on.
Hopefully you're able to see it in the full screen at the moment, but both goals in this game very good. Like the Turriff's goal, Mackenzie Taylor's sort of turn and pass, I thought was excellent, and a good finish for Rhys McEwen. And then Innes Mackay's goal for a centre half scoring an overhead kick. Jack Murray even scored all those goals for Buckie last season, but did he score an overhead kick? I'm not so sure.
Disappointing for Ryan Hay on a day when he scored a volley at the back post that he's been overshadowed.
But he described as Ibrahimovic-like as well. Just a tremendous goal for Innes Mackay. Innes was
a teammate of my son at youth level, and when he was, how do I say this, even svelter and more athletic, he still never showed anything like that. So fair play, it's a terrific finish.
Brilliant. What I would say is he has got he's a big lad in this in terms of height, So he has got kind of the sort of right levers and limbs for pulling off something like that. And aye, great goal. And in the end, I think probably about the right result, but I think it was a funny sort of game in the sense that over the piece, Bucky posed a bit more threat and probably had the better chances. But then once Turriff got themselves in front, I think they felt reasonably confident with the way they defended it, being able to see it out, and Bucky would have come away with nothing. So I think, both teams maybe that wee hint of disappointment, because the Jags maybe could have had the first goal and gone on and won it, and then Turriff, once they were ahead, sort of felt they could have seen it out. But over the piece, I think a pretty entertaining spectacle, again in difficult conditions, we're told, and 2 really good goals, and a decent advert for Highland League football and a point apiece.
Okay, let's have a look then at the latest Breedon Highland League standings after Saturday's matches. That's all of Saturday's Breedon Highland League action rounded off then. Just a reminder, the results panel you've just watched is taken from our main Highland League Weekly show, which is over on the Press and Journal website, but it's for subscribers only. If you'd like access to this week's show, including 2 highlights matches and a memory match with Inverurie Locos Paul Cooch, you can gain access by becoming a Press and Journal subscriber for the low price of just £1 for your first 3 months via our sports pack. But the next time we'll see you here on YouTube will be next week's results panel, should be out on Tuesday. It's the Breedon Highland League's Premier Cup competition, is that fair to say? The R. Davidson at Bankery Highland League Cup semi-finals this weekend, so our main show will have highlights of both matches, but we'll be discussing the results of both games here on YouTube. In the meantime, keep up to date with everything Highland League and Highland League Weekly from the Press and Journal via 2 avenues. You can sign up to our various social media channels. There's also a link to sign up for Highland League newsletter below this video. Until we see you next though, please enjoy the football.